Most of us dream about living in the perfect neighborhood. What happens when that perfect neighborhood, that dream place, turns out to be a complete and utter nightmare? Today, I'm going to dive into and expose the dark side of what makes a bad homeowners association, and I'm going to give you 5 things that you want to look out for. So you want to stay tuned. One of the first things that you want to look out for is to see how healthy the HOA reserves are. Now, reserves are money set aside for much needed things like repairs. So this is important for 2 reasons. Number 1, if the HOA does not have money in its coffers or in its reserves, you might not get the loan if you're going to purchase in that community. So lenders typically look at those reserves because if you're going conventional, they want to see about 70% of the reserves are funded. If you're going FHA, they usually ask for 10% of the annual budget to be put into reserves. Now, if the HOA doesn't have that money, when an emergency repair pops up, then that leaves them kind of short. And that leads me to reason number 2. If that's the case, normally that is resolved in one of 2 ways. The HOA either raises its monthly dues or they issue what's called a special assessment. A special assessment is just a fancy way of saying, we're gonna charge you X amount of dollars for these repairs. Every owner is going to pay this. No questions asked. This is in addition to your monthly HOA fees. This is important to the lender because if you are somebody that's purchasing and you're kind of already at the cap of where you need to purchase at, that additional fee might push you over the brink and cause you to default on one of 2 things, either your HOA assessments, or in this case, maybe you don't pay your mortgage, which means you're going to default of your loan. Your lender doesn't want to see either of those things happen. That's why they look at the reserves very, very carefully. So if you don't have reserves in your HOA as a homeowner, that's a bad sign that you might get a special assessment. If you're looking to purchase, you might not get the loan funded. Number 2, delinquencies. Yes, delinquencies. That word in and of itself just sounds like trouble. Delinquencies are when there are homeowners who refuse or just can't pay their monthly HOA dues. This leads to a budget shortfall and it can cause potential problems down the road. So again, if the HOA doesn't have the money that it needs to cover simple things, simple expenses such as lawn and maintenance or pool care, then when you have delinquent homeowners, that means everybody else either has to carry the weight or the amenities and the property itself kind of go to waste. So imagine that you can no longer hire a gardener or a landscaper to come in and cut the grass or trim the trees or the hedges. Now your complex looks more like Jumanji, and nobody really wants to see that. So for lenders, they look at this also because they have a threshold. The threshold is typically 15% delinquencies. How do you come up with that number? Well, you take the total number of people who are delinquent divided by the total number of actual homeowners is going to give you a percentage. If that percentage is 15% or higher, you probably will not get funded for a loan. They're going to deny your loan outright altogether because there's too many delinquencies. And the lender is issuing this loan to you with the property being collateral. Well, if they think that the property or the property in whole is going to be kind of, let's just say, compromised, then they may not want to fund the loan for you. So just kind of look out for that too. Reason number 3, pending litigations or lawsuits. So lights, camera, action, or should I say litigation. If the HOA is going through a pending litigation, chances are that you may not get a loan as well. The reason for this is because if there is a litigation pending against the HOA community, in other words, the HOA is the plaintiff in this case, then that may add up to some costly attorney's fees, court fees, the whole 9 yards. And if they lose the litigation, that may also mean a substantial payout. Well, where does that money come from? Typically, it would come from the reserves. But if there are no reserves and there's no money in the coffer in the operating budget to cover pending litigations, then guess what? How does the HOA pay again for things like maintenance and care or emergency repairs? It can't. And so the lender looks at this as a big red flag, and so should you. Even as a homeowner in an HOA community, if you really want to see some drama, just grab your popcorn and pull up to the courtroom. It's better than watching a Netflix special, trust me. People argue from things like fence colors, pet parrots, you name it. It goes down in HOA litigations. Sometimes it's kind of petty stuff, and most of the time it's kind of petty stuff. But sometimes there are big ticket items that need to be addressed. And if the HOA loses that case, again, it puts the property in risk of not being able to maintain itself. And remember, the property is the lender's collateral. So, I'm not even gonna say probably, definitely, if the HOA is going through a pending litigation where they are being sued, your lender will not loan you money to buy in that complex. Period. Point blank. Forget about it. Reason number 4, too many non-owner occupied units. Yeah, you heard it right. The lender also looks at how many units are being leased out, because they are loaning you money to buy into a community of other homeowners. Well, when there aren't a ton of homeowners, it's more like an apartment complex, and the lender doesn't look at that too kindly. Now, this is going to vary by state to state, but what we used to see, or what most CC&Rs, or covenants, conditions, and restrictions, used to say, or that's part of the HOA bylaws, right? You'll get that when you become a homeowner in an HOA community. The CC&Rs would typically stipulate that there cannot be a certain percentage of non-owner occupied units in that complex. It used to be had to be like 25% or less, but that's going to vary state to state. Now, here in California, we had an assembly bill that essentially put the kibosh on that, so HOAs can't kind of discriminate and say that only a certain amount can be non-owner occupied, especially when we're going through a situation where we don't have a ton of inventory for housing that's out there. So that's why this bill was passed. But for HOA communities, if you live in one, you don't want to be around a bunch of renters. No offense to the renters, but you want to be around community people that have a vested interest in the HOA community. Why? Most renters don't really care about the community. They're just renting for a year, 2 years, and then they're gone. Well, if you're a homeowner, you're probably going to be there, develop roots, and there's no real way that you can get a sense of camaraderie and community if out of 60 units, 40 of them are renter occupied. Number 5, least but not last, a bad HOA management company. Now, I can't harp on this enough. You probably won't be able to tell this when you're first purchasing in a community whether the HOA management company is bad, but I advise my clients to talk to people who live in the community already. So if we can find a neighbor, we just want to ask them questions about the HOA. Are they responsive to complaints? Do they deal with people in a respectful manner? Because these are people that are going to be enforcing the rules, coming up with the rules. And if the blind are leading the blind, it's going to drive everybody into a ditch. You definitely don't want that as either a homeowner or somebody who's looking to purchase in a community. So having an HOA management company that isn't worth their weight in salt is going to make or break your experience living in that community. So for example, we live in an HOA community. I actually wound up joining the board. If anything, I would say join the board or at least go to the monthly meetings. That's something I tell all of my clients who are living in or going to live in HOA communities to do. I joined the board because I wanted to be privy to all the information that's out there. So I know everything that's going on in the community as the treasurer. So I see where the money is coming in, I see where the money is going. Most people don't get that. So there's not a lot of transparency sometimes that takes place between the HOA and the community members. So you want a board that's responsive, you want a board that's respectful, you want a board that has financial transparency, because the one thing that you don't want to do is, again, you're living your best life and then all of a sudden you get a notice on your door that you owe an exorbitant amount of money and you're thinking, why am I paying this? Well, that's because your HOA poorly managed the project. They poorly managed what was going on with the finances, and because of that, you as a homeowner are now on the hook. So there you have it, folks. Bad HOAs, they can turn your dream home into a potential comedy of errors. So you found out just how hard it can be for lenders to finance these type of properties when they're not managed properly, when they don't have the proper funding in place. All of these things can go into whether your deal goes over the top or it gets crushed under the weight of somebody's foot. Now, that's all I have for now, but for more tips, tricks, and insights, you're gonna wanna watch this video right here or wherever that video is at, because not only is part of the HOA and the reserves and all of that stuff financially important, you're gonna have to pay HOA dues, and in an HOA community, you're also gonna have homeowners insurance. These costs are increasing year by year, and this year in particularly, they seem to be going up drastically. Watch this video right here to find out why and what you can do to either lower your costs, or if you're getting kicked off of your current homeowners insurance, what you can do to remedy that.